This is the Anthrobiology Podcast, hosted by me, Gabby LaPera. Every 2 weeks, I interview a biological anthropologist about what makes us, us. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. I have something a little bit different for you this week. I interviewed a CRM, which stands for Cultural Resource Management Archaeologist, named Chris Webster. And this is kind of out of my wheelhouse. I know I said all biological anthropology all the time, but we do talk a little bit about what it's like for biological anthropologists to work with CRM archaeologists. And I really wanted to talk to someone who didn't just go straight into academia. I think that, and we talk a little bit about this on the show, I think we really do a disservice to students by not highlighting all of the potential career paths that you might be able to have in anthropology. And I know that I'm not just talking to biological anthropology students out there, or maybe I am, and I'm talking to some folks who are also thinking about archaeology as a potential career track. That's really why I wanted to do this show, just to highlight a different professional future in anthropology besides the usual become a professor, do research at an institution, teach undergrads. There's a lot of different ways to be in anthropology besides just that. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at gabby.lapera@anthrobiology.com or hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. Always happy to talk to you via whatever avenue you so choose. Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. Enjoy the show. Hey there, everyone. This is Gabby LaPera. You are joining me for another episode of the Anthrobiology Podcast. On Skype with me today is Chris Webster. He is the owner of, as far as I can tell from his LinkedIn, about 1 billion different businesses. A very, very busy man. So thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm usually the one doing the interviewing, so it's a nice change of pace to be on the other side of the microphone for once.
Yeah, definitely. I had an interesting experience earlier this year. I was on the Arc and Anth podcast, and I was like, this is very weird being interviewed on an anthropology podcast about my anthropology podcast.
Nice.
So you, like I said, have a lot of different businesses. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so primarily I run a business called DigTech, which is Digital Technologies and Archaeological Consulting. And under the DigTech banner, I do a number of different things. We actually do cultural resource management or CRM work. And I've got a few clients. In fact, I just was talking to one the other day, and we're going to have to take our trip and go to Nevada for a few weeks in probably late August, early September to do some archaeology. But I'm not really focusing on that much, because I'm focusing more on the Archaeology Podcast Network, arcpodnet.com. And we've been running that for a little over about 5.5 years now. I've been podcasting for about 10 years. And on the APN, we really focus on public education and outreach through free podcasts. So we have a membership system for people to join if they want to and support us a little bit. We do advertising and sponsorship as well, just to try to keep the lights on. But otherwise, it's totally free archaeological education and podcasts. And we have over about 4,000 episodes total across at least 10, 15 active shows and probably about 10 or 15 archive shows at this point as well. So lots of material over there for you to listen to and learn about archaeology from.
Which is insane. Like, I'm running a single podcast while having a single full-time job, and it feels like so much. So I'm super impressed by the breadth that you have available for listeners. So the reason I invited you on the show is because you work in CRM, which is Cultural Resources Management.
Yep.
One of the things that I think that we as a discipline perhaps don't do a great job of is telling people that there are alternatives besides just going to grad school and then scrapping to find a job in academia.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those big alternatives is CRM. And I know that you focus more on archaeology as opposed to, I should say, you are an archaeologist as opposed to a biological anthropologist, but it's definitely another alternative for students who are listening to this podcast and aren't really sure which discipline they want to focus on.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's a good point, because there are a lot of programs, my own undergraduate program included. I remember CRM was like a bullet point on an intro to archaeology class. I found out later on it was primarily because the professor that taught that class, she was, let's say, less than thrilled about CRM archaeologists in general. People always say there's this big divide between academia and CRM. I don't generally believe it. I think we work together a lot in certain circumstances, and I don't want to be the conspiracy theorist that says those kinds of things are happening, but they do happen sometimes. But there's also, conflicts between CRM archaeologists and other academics themselves, I'm sure. So, but anyway, point is, there are a lot of things you can do in the CRM world. I heard a statistic a long time ago that said basically something like 80 to 90% of the archaeology done in this country, the United States, is through CRM, which totally makes sense because all the development projects, all the highway infrastructure projects, things like that, all of them have a CRM component or requirement prior to development. Whereas with academic projects, a lot of times you'll have a professor or a grad student or somebody focusing on, say, a single site that they go back to year after year. And while they're recovering a lot of data, they're not really seeing new sites. Whereas a typical CRM archaeologist might see 10, 15 different states in a single year, states like that they travel to, and then projects all over those because they might be a week here, 2 weeks there, a couple months here, a couple months there. So you're all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's no different for bio. So there's lots of projects.
Yeah, so that's actually something I want to dig into real quick, which is there is a requirement for CRM work to be done on a lot of building projects. That's like a legal requirement.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize this, but before someone puts in a shopping mall, they have to make sure that there's nothing of historical or scientific interest on the land that they're going to put the shopping mall on.
Right.
And in order to do that, they have to hire someone who does CRM.
That's absolutely true. And there's a myriad of laws, too, depending on where you're at, which is why you might find more work in certain states versus other. Like, for example, California has laws that go above and beyond the National Historic Preservation Act, which generally governs CRM, and the National Environmental Policy Act, which also has a component in governing CRM. But California has the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, which, again, goes above and beyond. I mean, you can't practically drop a spoon in your own backyard without having a CRM archaeologist go look at it first, because you might move some dirt. Yeah.
California really cares.
That's right.
So you mentioned that you've been to a ton of sites, like you've done a lot of different digs. And this honestly kind of appeals to me as someone who there's a lot of reasons that I don't think I would have made it in academia. One of them being that I get bored of topics after a while.
Yeah.
That is an enduring theme of all of the people who are super successful that I talk to on this show, is that they're like, I am just so incredibly passionate about teeth or the foot, right, or whatever. And I'm like, I'm interested for like a month and then I'm like, I'm done. CRM seems like something that might be more suited to someone with my personality type.
I think you're totally right. And I'm the same way, because you're going to have good projects and you're going to have bad projects, right? And not bad projects in the way of like, I don't know, you feel bad doing it or something like that. Maybe they're just not very interesting. I mean, I've had plenty of projects where, we go months and months and months or thousands of acres of survey and shovel test and not find anything. I mean, we're not out there hunting for artifacts, but let's be honest, when we find stuff, it's really cool and exciting. They always say negative data is also data. The fact that nothing's there is also an important thing to know, but it makes it really boring. But the thing is, when you're done with the project, you're gone. That's it. You're never there again. I mean, unless 10 years goes by. In a lot of states, you have to do a project again in 10 years. If nothing's been done, you have to reassess the data. But aside from that, you're on to the next thing. So if this project is boring or you're over it or there's just too much going on, you can just leave and go to a new one, or you can wait till this project is over and you'll get a different one somewhere else. And if you don't like the state you're in, you can work somewhere else. There's some caveats to that. But yeah, it's generally, if you don't like where you are and what you're doing, just move and do something else. And it's not forever. So I love that aspect of this job as well.
So, but on the flip side, what happens when you're working on a site that's super duper interesting, your contract runs out? How does that feel? What happens to the site?
Well, that's part of CRM too, especially if you're at the field tech level, which most people, even grad students that come out, would probably be more at the field tech level than at, say, the crew chief or project manager level. However, a biological anthropologist might be more of an outside consultant and outside all those levels. But either way, one of the real downsides to this field is that once the project's over, no matter what level you're at, unless you work for the company that was actually doing the project and you're in the office and you're part of the report writing, like you're not part of what happened to it. You never get to see the results. Field technicians in archaeology, they often work on hundreds of projects in their career, and they don't know what happened to any of them. Like they just collect the data and they're not part of the analysis. They don't get copied on the report. They never see the report. They never see anything that happens. And a lot of times, because this is CRM, there's no continuing research that you can do. Out here in the desert west, like I work mostly in Nevada and Eastern California, if you find something interesting, more often than not, the pipeline or whatever they're doing can just avoid it. And they will. They won't excavate. They'll just avoid after survey because they can. But if you're working on the East Coast or the Midwest, there's no avoiding because there's nowhere else you can go, right? It's totally built up. There's all kinds of housing developments and all kinds of stuff. So generally, you go through all phases of archaeology. You'll do a survey, you'll do some sort of testing phase, and then you'll do an excavation phase after that, and you'll see it through to the end, which kind of gives you that academic sort of feel to it when you see it all the way through to the end. But as a CRM archaeologist, there's no guarantee you'll even be on all those phases of the project because a lot of times they're bid out each time. The same company might not even do them unless they won a full contract or something. So you might be on the survey phase, and then that part ends, and you're off to something else. Company lets you go, and you go do something different. So I think for biological anthropologists, just to bring it back to that, it would be a little bit different because there's fewer of them, and they're not generally field technician type people. They would probably work in a salaried position for a CRM company and then travel around to the different projects, giving consulting on project with human remains and things like that. So from that standpoint, it's actually better for the bioants than it is for the CRM ARC field techs because they're more likely to have a more stable position because there's fewer of them.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways. I've seen like biological anthropologists who have a contract position with the CRM firm, and then I've also seen CRM firms go to whoever the local biological anthropologist is at the museum or the university or whatever and ask them to come in and assess the remains. I've seen it kind of both ways. Because one thing that you have to think about too, when you do find human remains, is you have to decide whether they're historic, prehistoric, or forensic. And if they're forensic, like that's yesterday. That's like a whole nother kettle of fish. You have to call the police. Like it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But have you worked with biological anthropologists out in the field doing CRM?
Yeah, I have. Actually, my second project ever was in downtown Miami, and it was a natural well. I mean, right smack in downtown Miami. There's a huge building there now, but it was the last undeveloped lot downtown. It was right next to the Miami River and not too far from the Intercoastal Waterway. And the water from the brackish river and the salty intercoastal would filter through the limestone and become fresh water. And there was a natural well there. And the Tequesta Indians lived there for thousands and thousands of years before they were basically moved to Cuba. And then there was a Spanish fort there, and there was a hotel there. Next to it, actually, was still a parking lot where we were working. But anyway, there were human remains that the Tequesta Indians would bury there. They would let their bones desiccate on the other side of the river and then bring them over and dump them into these limestone solution holes, basically disarticulated. And then the Spanish would also chuck people into the well. I don't know what caused them to do that. And we had a biological anthropologist on staff that was there the whole time, and she would do most of the preliminary identification and then all the analysis on the project. So she was there for a really long time, a couple of years probably, doing the analysis on that project because we found tens of thousands of individual human, not individual specimens, but human bones. And it was an incredible project. I kind of thought because that was my second project ever, I was like, oh, this must be the way all CRM archaeology projects is, but it's not. It depends on where you work. If you work on the East Coast, you're more likely to encounter human remains because of where you're at and how they are affected by the soil. Out here in the West, they disintegrate into dust almost immediately. You know, even if you find a burial, there's probably nothing in it. Maybe in California, like coastal California, you'd find more, but yeah, it really depends.
Yeah. The other place that you find a lot of human remains out west is in caves.
Oh, yeah.
Because they have some protection from the elements that lets them dry out. And actually, you end up with mummies.
Right, exactly.
Because it's dry.
Yeah.
Mummies are fun.
Yeah.
On that note, one of the things that you do as an archaeologist, and we also do as a biological anthropologist, one of the areas that we intersect is that we both have to deal with kind of sensitive cultural remains. Mm-hmm. What is that like, especially if you're working for like a developer that wants to put a bunch of row houses and you find like a trove of Native American artifacts. What kind of happens then? What is it like dealing with the tribes? Is that something that you deal with? Kind of, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it really depends on the area that you're in and what the regulations are. Honestly, ethically, you should always try to find, local tribes to consult with. And sometimes there just aren't any. Like, for example, down in Florida, there was the Seminole tribe, but the Seminole Indians were basically moved out of Florida at some point, and a lot of them have come back, of course, but they're like, yeah, we don't care about that stuff. That's not even our history. Like when we talked about the Tequesta Indians, but we did have somebody come over and do like a sage burning, and you have to honor that really when that happens. Out here in California and a lot of parts of Nevada, tribal monitoring is very heavy. So they might be out there regardless of whether you found anything or not yet. There's a lot of times Native American consultation is required. Either they'll insist on having a monitor on site, which means they're out doing survey with you. They're not actually looking for anything. They're just walking with you. And if you find anything, they'll consult and tell you what to do. But it's a case-by-case basis. And 99% of the time, you just do what they say. And you listen to what their consultation is. And you say, thank you for that. And, the other thing is, you can learn a lot from the Native Americans because they get very specialized training to be monitors for their tribe. And as CRM archaeologists, we learn stuff in school, but we learn stuff in more of a broad general sense. Whereas the people that you're working with that are monitoring, that's their ancestral homeland. And they have a lot of indigenous knowledge about the area, different things, different types of artifacts that you may not be aware of that are non-standard types of things. And it's really engaging and really beneficial to learn from them as you go and to engage with them as much as possible. But there's definitely times when people don't do that enough and they just try to get the project done and they get in trouble for it later, to be honest.
Good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. This is kind of an ongoing thing that we are talking about in biological anthropology, which is we have a hand in colonialism and scientific racism. And then on top of that, we also, like as a discipline, there were a lot of bodies stolen and then put into museums.
Yes.
And we're still trying to return them.
Yep.
Some people more successfully than others. So it's definitely a conversation that we're still having. It's interesting. In some cases, like you see really healthy relationships being formed. And then in other cases, you see a lot more friction. So it's definitely interesting to talk to someone in archaeology who I had no idea about the system of field monitoring. That's like a whole new great idea to me.
Yeah, it's biggest. The biggest I've ever seen it is in California because California requires it on most lands for tribal consultation, whereas a lot of states don't require tribal consultation, but they request tribal consultation. Anytime you tell an archaeologist working for a company that's running tight on margins anyway that they need to use part of their budget for a tribal monitor, if they're not required to do it, it's unfortunate, but they probably won't, unless it really is required. But if it's required, which I think it should be everywhere, then you could build that into the project cost, right? When you do the proposal and everybody's doing it, so you're on a level playing field, like some BLM lands and U.S. Forest Service lands, you are required to consult, but not in all areas, because there's some areas that just don't have a tribal presence anymore, unfortunately. There's just nobody there that is willing to consult because it's been moved out or it's just too remote and they don't live there anymore.
Yeah, this is again like a whole nother world that I had no idea really existed until actually after I graduated from grad school. But it was just like one that I never really had that much contact with. All of the digs that I went to, first of all of the digs I went to already had human remains, but all of the digs I went to were like academic. Like we were there to do academic stuff. Yes. Hey,
I will say, just while I'm thinking about it too, there was one circumstance, it was about a year ago. I was working as a consultant for another company. I actually worked as a consultant for a company called WildNote, which is a digital data collection application that people can use, and they have biologists and wetlands people and also archaeologists using the application. But we had a client that wanted somebody on staff basically on this project down in Arizona, actually southern Arizona and California, right along the Mexican border. In fact, we were walking within 500 feet of the wall most of the time for our survey. And it wasn't for the new wall or anything. People always ask me that. It was actually for an electrical transmission line. But we did find what looked to us like relatively recent, and by recent I mean like a year, maybe 2 years, human remains, unfortunately. And that was, again, within sight of the border wall, so you can imagine what that was. But they called out a Border Patrol biological anthropologist and also a coroner to come out and take a look at it. So that is one other area where somebody could really do some good work there, because we were told that they gather the remains and they do what they can. I don't know what the truth of this is, but this is what we were told. But they do what they can to try to identify the remains. And I know people coming from Mexico probably haven't had any sort of DNA test or blood test in most cases. So, but they try to match up that way and they try to get the remains back to the family. But that's definitely in the purview of biological anthropologists, forensic scientists, and people of that like.
Yeah, I can actually confirm for you. I know a few people who work in that area on the border. There's a lot of places where you can find viable DNA, especially in bodies that haven't been out there that long, but especially inside the teeth.
Oh.
And if they can find any other identifying, sometimes like you find someone's wallet on them and it's like pretty apparent who they are. Other times they can kind of guess by interviewing other people who've gotten over the border, and then they can do DNA comparisons to living relatives who are still in Mexico. And then they do their best to send the bodies back to the families so they can get some kind of closure. But they do really hard, impressive work down there. So it is actually happening.
Well, that's good. That's good to know, because I didn't know if the Border Patrol agent was just giving us a line or what.
Yeah, sometimes it can be hard to tell with them. But no, those anthropologists are super impressive people. Anyway, is there anything else you want to say about CRM or archaeology or working with biological anthropologists or your favorite soup recipe?
I will just say that, as far as CRM goes, it's a tough field, and you really are going to have to be flexible, especially early on, in order to be, I guess, mentally content with this field, regardless of what level you're at. You come out of college or you come out of grad school and you just kind of expect, because this is the way our culture is, you expect, oh, great, now all the riches are going to come to me and I'm going to find a job and I'm going to have, a spouse and 2.5 kids and a picket fence, right? And it just doesn't work that way. And in CRM especially, it doesn't matter if you're an undergrad, grad student, PhD, whatever, you're going to hustle for several years probably. And I mean, some people will find that like great government job that they end up staying at for 20 years, but more than likely you're going to hustle for a while until you find some place that really needs your skills for a long time, and they have the work for it too. That's the other big thing, is they have the work for it, because they might have a job that they hire you for, but then no other jobs with, especially for bios, no other jobs with like human remains or something like that, and you might be doing something else outside your field and you might not like that. So you got to pick up and go, and if you haven't started a family yet, don't until you get a little more settled, because it's just going to be difficult, and you're going to end up, a lot of people end up leaving the field because of that, because they expected one thing and they didn't get it. And now they're just leaving the field and going to look for something else. But if you know what you're getting at going in, this is why on the CRM Archaeology podcast, my longest running show, we always talk about that. We always say, manage your expectations, know what you're going to get, and you'll be happier for it. You won't have these expectations that are beyond reality, to be honest.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I really appreciated about your show is you have a lot of people who are in the field right now talking about what it's actually like to be there. And that's something that I would like to do more on this show, is talk about what are the realities of academia? Like, what are you actually going to be able to do with your graduate degree? Like, I have my master's in anthropology and I am working as an editor in financial tech. Like,
there you go.
Exactly. Like that's what happens. And like, I got a lot of those skills by getting my master's degree in editing, but it's not necessarily one career path, like one straight shot. And if it's something that you really want, it has to be something that you really, really want, if that makes sense.
It does. And that's another thing we tell people as well. You're a good example of that, is you feel like you learn one thing when you're in grad school or your undergrad, whatever the case is, but really you're learning a set of skills that can be applied in lots of different areas. And there isn't necessarily one straight path to retirement, because retirement doesn't exist for this generation, I don't think, but there is no one straight path towards that. And you can find all kinds of different things. I mean, for example, I working through WildNote, doing sales for other people, trying to sell this application to archaeologists, but also develop it at the same time. I met this guy who works for an Australian company that sells safety software. Like if you have an incident or a hazard or something like that, this software helps the company manage that. And it turns out that software, the development of it, was very similar to the forms and stuff that we were doing for WildNote. So now I'm also consulting for them and doing implementation for large companies. I mean, I've got several $250,000 clients that are, 10, 13,000 users that I'm doing implementation for. And those are skills I developed working on WildNote, and I was able to get the WildNote job because those are skills I developed being an archaeologist and being interested in digital things. And I learned a lot of that in some classes I took in my grad school, and it goes all the way back. So,
Yeah.
Don't have too many expectations and just be flexible.
Yeah, I think being flexible is like a really key thing, and being imaginative about how you can apply what you know. And then also just being interested in a lot of things. I think that just helps you as a human being generally, just being curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed.
So I know you're on a road trip, which sounds really, really cool. Listeners, you didn't hear this part because I cut it out from the beginning, but he's going on like an epic countrywide field trip in an RV, and I'm super jealous because I have been in my 300 square foot studio for 4 months. But we have reached the end of the show, which means that it is time to ask you 3 questions, the same 3 questions I ask everyone. And the first question is, if someone wants to learn more about CRM or your field, where is a good place for them to start?
Well, I will give you 2 answers. The best one is probably the CRM Archaeology podcast. We just recorded our 192nd episode, I think. We've been going every 2 weeks for the last 8 or 9 years, and it's a great resource. I also have a book that I published about 4 years ago through Routledge, and it's called what is it called? Wow, I don't even remember what the heck the name of my book is called. It's been too long since I've seen it.
I'm looking it up right now.
What is the name of my book?
Okay, I found it. It is
Yeah.
Field Archaeologist Survival Guide, Getting a Job and Working in Cultural Resource Management.
Yes. Thank you for telling me the name of my own book.
You're welcome.
I feel crazy that I couldn't remember that. Yes. But that book, the reason I wrote that is this book isn't necessarily going to tell you about CRM. You're not going to learn about the laws and things like that about CRM. You're going to learn how to live and be happy as a CRM archaeologist. I talk about living on the road, living in hotel rooms, living in tents, doing the different types of jobs you can find, getting a job in CRM. I mean, there's all these different things about the lifestyle of a CRM archaeologist, and I feel like that's where the industry really breaks down. You know, we teach people all about laws and regulations, but we don't teach them how to be happy doing this job, and that's what I try to do with that book.
That is a really interesting perspective and something that I think is true of academia in general. Thank you for sharing that book. That is really interesting, and I'm really excited to look at it. Second question, are you reading anything for work right now?
Yeah, I'm actually just finishing up. I should have finished it before we finished the interview, but one of the latest shows that we recorded for the Archaeotech podcast, another one that I host, was from a gentleman named Dr. Mark McCoy, and it was a book called Maps for Time Travelers. And he basically equates historic maps and current spatial and geospatial techniques to time travel in archaeology, in the way that when you look at these things, you're actually stepping back in time to look at these areas in certain and particular ways. And it's a really great book because it's not written for an academic audience, but it can be beneficial to an academic audience because it's written in very layman's, easy to read, very nice, casual terms. And he just does a really good job at explaining what can be relatively complex geospatial topics like GIS and drones and photogrammetry and things like that. So it's a great book, and it's brand new, which is why we interviewed him. And if you want to hear about him, you can just check out the Archaeotech podcast, episode 131.
Question for you. Do you sleep at all? You have 8 jobs, 15 podcasts. Is that something that you ever do?
I mean, I enjoy doing most of that, so I don't really see a lot of that as work. I have regular work for that safety company during the day. We have archaeology that we do occasionally. And in the evenings and early mornings, I edit podcasts for the APN. I edit all the podcasts on the APN. And I also edit for clients as well. I have a company called Chris Webster Productions that I do full production and editing for clients.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because here's another job. Just in case, listeners, I think we're up to 5.
Yes. My wife and I don't have kids. We don't have pets, and I have a lot of time. So there you go.
I'm almost scared to ask you my third question, which is what are you reading or consuming for fun right now?
Well, I'll tell you, we've been really into because we basically, as you alluded to, we basically moved into an RV to travel around the country. We still have our townhouse that we own in Reno, but we're going to rent that out starting in probably September. And we're living in this RV and moving around. So we've been consuming a lot of YouTube channels of people who are living the RV life so we can learn, because there's definitely, like anything, I mean, there's a lot to know about this. You don't just get into one and start traveling around. There's a whole bunch of complex systems, unlike a house where things just kind of work. There's a whole bunch of complex systems that if you don't do things the right way, it'll fail and be very bad for you because it's your home. Now you're stuck on the side of the highway and, your water tank is leaking or something like that. So we've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about that. And before that, it was a lot of YouTube videos about people sailing, because originally we were looking at buying a boat and living on that. But I think the RV was a good intermediate step there. We may still do that later on in the future, a couple of years down the road when we get used to this. But right now we're just watching a lot of videos and channels that are dedicated to the RV lifestyle.
I think I'd rather have an RV than a boat. My parents are boat people, and I am not. I'm like a huge disappointment in that regard to my father and my grandfather, who were like fishermen in a small village in Spain. And I'm just like, I get anywhere near the sea and I get green around the gills.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about your life, especially since you have a very, very busy schedule. Again, like, I can't believe that you do so many things. Have a lot of fun on your road trip, and maybe we'll hear from you again one day on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. It was a fun to be here.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Anthrobiology podcast. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me at gabby.lapera@anthrobiology.com. That's spelled GABY.LAPERA@anthrobiology.com. This show was produced and edited by me. Music courtesy of Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear at Sound of Picture.